Good evening, or sorry, not good evening. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. Welcome to our final discussion of the practice of the presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Just to recap, we've talked about in previous weeks the conversations with Brother Lawrence. We talked about letters with Brother Lawrence, and we talked about spiritual maxims of Brother Lawrence, all of which have been amazing. I've really gained a lot out of this reading and kind of chewed on it. And it is exactly what I think provides for a prayerful and life-giving Lent. And that's not to say that it's the right Lent for everybody. Everybody. Some people go into it full force with Lenten disciplines, and that is sort of the target that they can focus on. And that could be something very physical, like giving up a certain food, taking on a certain action. I'm getting a phone call. I'm going to let that go to voicemail. And so, anyway, I got off topic. Lenten disciplines are an easy way to put a very practical, material focus on prayer life. If you give up chocolate for Lent, then it's pretty straightforward. If that's made of chocolate, I'm not going to eat it. I'm going to eat this instead. And then when I want the chocolate, when I'm craving the chocolate, I will use that as a time to remember God's presence in my life and maybe say a quick prayer. Or if I'm presented with chocolate and am actively turning away from it, again, that's kind of a reminder. It's like finding the string wrapped on your finger to remind you of something. You see the chocolate, you say, "Oh, can't have that, it's Lent." That, in that moment, becomes a little spark of a prayer where you are reminding yourself of God's presence. Likewise, when I see emergency vehicles, first responding vehicles, like if there's a police car or a ambulance or a fire truck, if I see one of those first responder vehicles going down the road with their lights and siren and whatnot, I just real quickly, just like as I'm driving, just touch my heart, because it's a shorthand of a prayer that I am saying for those women and men responding to the emergency, as well as the people who are endangered or ill or whatever the case may be. But just that simple touch of the heart is kind of a shorthand version of me having a full prayer, because God knows what I'm praying. God knows why I'm doing that. But it's just a quick, simple little that is that prayer and that remembering and recalling of God's ever-present existence in my life. Everywhere, all around me right now is God. Everywhere, all around you is God, all day, every day. And if we clue into that, I think we get after what Brother Lawrence is saying. So, this final chapter, I'm calling them chapters, I get a section, whatever you call it. The character of Brother Lawrence. It's the editor of this book is basically opining on the character of Brother Lawrence 2 years after Brother Lawrence's death. And I really, okay, well, I'll be frank. I'll be honest. I didn't get as much out of this week's section as I have previous sections. Does that mean it's a bad section? No. I just think that when you are reading the kind of like when you're going back to the primary source, i.e. the writings of Brother Lawrence himself, it's just so rich and good. I mean, this is kind of like the epilogue at the end of a really good story that's already concluded. I mean, it's good, it's nice, but at the same time, it's not as good as that story that you just, or that movie or whatever it was that you just spent however long consuming. Man, every time when this early in the morning, it's hard to speak. I love the line, as one, speaking of Brother Lawrence, who has chosen to be a doorkeeper in the house of God rather than hold a high rank among sinners. Ooh, that's good. Someone who has chosen to be the doorkeeper in the house of God rather than hold a high rank among sinners. So one, it speaks of the humbleness of the monastic life and the life of prayer. Not receiving a high station or a high rank, being a doorman, a porter. But at the same time, it beautifully describes, I think, the job of the religious. And it's not just professionals like me or like people who have a professed religious life, like monastics. That in a way we are doorkeepers to the house of God, as in, I have found you, won't you come in? Can I help you enter into the house of God? I think it's a great description of what that kind of work does, that ministry does, that vocation does. Pardon me. You're just gonna have to, just roll with it. Who has taken upon himself the yoke of Jesus Christ and preferred it to the empty pomp and pleasures of the world. I need to be reminded of that. I need to take on the yoke of Christ and be less concerned with the pleasures of the world. I think we all can relate to that and be reminded. I think it's good for us to be reminded of that. Also, page 87 right here. That God alone can reveal himself to us as we toil and exercise our mind in reason and in science, forgetting that therein we can only see a copy, whilst we neglect to gaze on the incomparable original. Excuse me one second. All right, so in this part, Brother Lawrence is talking about his lifetime of reading books and the works of others. I think he was very much, especially prior to his religious life, he was very much in the world, trying to understand what the world was all about by reading scholars and books. Probably not unlike myself at a younger age. I think it's part of a lot of the reason I was a philosophy major in college. I wanted to understand the world, and I also wanted to do it through the power of my own thinking. And I think that was pretty prideful. I'm not saying that philosophers are prideful, even though, well, yes, philosophers are pretty prideful. But that's not a character flaw, or it's not a statement about what they do. But in the end, I did find philosophy incomplete, if not very helpful. It certainly gave me tools that I would carry for the rest of my life, and helped me sharpen some other tools that I had already acquired earlier in life. But I don't think it was the answer, at least for me. I still read some philosophy from now and again, but honestly, I don't think it's going to be the end result. I think philosophy will help us in our own religious life. Likewise, Brother Lawrence is speaking about when he's talking about all the reading he did. He's talking about science. He's talking about the scientific revolution that was happening in his day. Was very much sort of in that diametric opposite. Why are words failing me? That diametric opposition to religious life. So that you have God and you have science, and they have to be versus each other instead of coexisting in both and. If anything, religious contemplation makes me want to understand the world better, so I look to science to help explain the world better, and in learning more about how the world works, I gain a much better appreciation for what God has built. Science does not hurt my faith. Science informs my faith. Absolutely. And for people who think that you have to discount science because the Bible, then no, not at all. Use your reason. God gave you a brain. Use it and explore the world and go about the world using the knowledge and the wisdom that God gave us. If God didn't want us to use the benefit of our reason, we'd still be, living in caves, essentially. Or tents. I'd rather have a car and a plane. And internet where we can talk to each other. All right, so... But let's not forget, and he's talking about science and reason, and then, of course, me, I end up thinking about reason and philosophy. But anyway, all those pursuits of the mind, God can reveal himself to us, and we toil and exercise our mind in reason and in science, forgetting therein that we only see a copy, whilst we neglect to gaze upon the incomparable original. It is not enough to know God as a theory. Now here is it. This is it. All of our scientific understanding, all of our philosophical musing and contemplation gets us very far. But it is merely a reflection, a copy of the original that we cannot fully comprehend or understand. That is on a different dimension, a parallel, that cannot be observed by our three-dimensional brains moving through time and space. And so I don't have any issue with science and philosophy and whatnot, but it's because I stop to think there is something incomplete, and I'm going to recognize that on the front end. And so contemplating and meditating upon the incomparable completeness, the perfection that is God, does me well. And also I think that's a good reason to just repeat the idea that science is not going to replace God. It can't explain things well enough to do that. It's not enough to know God as a theory, and that hit me hard, because I am way too academic, and I think of God in terms of theory and how God moves, and what this theological statement means, and what this heretical statement meant in history, and how we've folded that into our practices throughout time, and so I think of things in a very, especially as far as faith goes, I think of things in a very theoretical way, because that's how I dig it. That's how I enjoy it. That's how I get something out of it. But man, do I need to be reminded pretty regularly that all the theorizing and all the building of systematic theology you can doesn't do diddly unless you have just a conversation with God, and that you create a personal connection with that power that you speak to that makes you giggle every once in a while, or that power that you speak to when you're really mad or feeling down, and you call out to the void, to the space, to the ether, to out there, and say, God, power, that thing that I am asking for help, I call upon you, when I am alone. And you have a conversation with someone that lasts you your lifetime. And all the theorizing and contemplation about the person of the Trinity and the substance of God and how the Eucharist works, all of those are great. But it is not a conversation with God. And so, at the risk of repeating myself from weeks past, Brother Lawrence is really pounding home this idea of just be present with God. And the trick is that God is always with us, and that we have to be reminded that there's someone else in the room, essentially. We are never alone, and that God is always with us. So I encourage you, brothers and sisters, to speak to that voice and to practice the presence of God, because it is not enough to have God as a theory, but to perceive God as present in soul and faith, and in love. On page 95, it says, his one method of going to God and abiding in his presence was to do all for love of him. For God regards not the greatness of the work, but the love which prompts it. For God regards not the greatness of the work, but the love that prompts it. I'm still working with that one. I completely agree that God measures and appreciates the love that prompts our good works, our acts of faith, and how we carry out the discipleship of Jesus. Well, I was going to say, however, doing some good work is still a good goal. Like, we should hope for grand things with our ministry. Helping lots of people, or helping people in a big way. Loving our neighbors in a big way. Ending racism and inequality in a big way. Making things not just equal but equitable in a big way. That would be great. That would be what God actually wants us to do. However, at the same time, I'm reminded of the story of the widow's mite, that there's a poor widow who doesn't have income because she is a widow, and this is way back when in Jesus' day, and that she's giving, she might be giving a shekel to the temple as a offering to God. And some big shot might be giving, a whole talent to the temple. But for the rich guy, a talent would be a drop in the bucket of his great wealth. And the old widow might, a shekel might be, a third of her wealth at that time, a third of her cash on hand. And so, or it could have been all of it. It could have been all the money she had. And so the widow's mite is a greater gift because it's not the amount that you give, it's the percentage that you give. It's the how much you're all in. Anyway, so that's my thought on that. Yeah, I'm still chewing on that one. I don't know. I still think we should do things in a big way. But at the same time, if you can't if you can't give a great deal, or you can't do a great, big, huge, world-changing project, simple projects are good too. But yeah, practicing the presence of God, and it is not enough to know God as a theory. Man, that sticks. Sticks with me, at least. All right, it's been lovely. It's been wonderful. I look forward to Holy Week. That comes up starting on Sunday. Please check the schedule, which is on the website, and you should be getting something in your mail very shortly that says the same thing. Don't forget to sign up for your slots for Easter. I'm asking that you sign up on the RSVP link. It's if you click on RedeemerBrookhaven.com / Holy Week, or if you go to the website and click on the Holy Week schedule, you'll see an RSVP sign up for church. Okay. I love you all. Be well, and as always, God bless.